Hi, boys and girls. In this video, I'm going to be reading Chapter 20 from History, Book 4, Old Hickory. There's something you might have noticed about the first 6 presidents. They were all from Virginia or Massachusetts. There's something else, too. They were all aristocrats. They had been born in successful, prosperous families. That gave them the time and opportunity to be well educated. John Adams and his son, John Quincy Adams, were both Harvard graduates. James Madison went to the College of New Jersey, which is now called Princeton. Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe attended the College of William and Mary. Only George Washington was not a college man. Still, he was well-read. That means he was well-educated and rich. Now, how do you think you would feel if you were living in 19th century America and Tennessee and you were poor? Do you think you would have a chance to be president? After Andrew Jackson was elected the 7th president, you know you would have a chance. If Andy Jackson could be president, then any white male born in the United States could be president. Remember, at the time, Jackson's democracy was only for white males. It would be many years before blacks, Indians, Asians, and women were allowed to vote. However, Jackson's presidency paved the way for all peoples. Jackson was born in 1767 in a log cabin on the border between North and South Carolina. His parents were poor Scotch-Irish farmers. The Scotch-Irish were people who had moved from Scotland to Northern Ireland to the United States. Andrew's dad died just before he was born, and his mother had to move with her 3 sons into her sister's home. There were 11 children in the house, and you know how kids are. It was a noisy place. Andy soon learned to speak out and wrestle and make the older boys respect him. He also learned to read. In those days, many farmers could not read, so most towns had public readers, people who read the newspapers aloud so everyone would know the news of the colonies. There's a story that when Andrew Jackson was a boy, he was a public reader, selected as often as any grown man. According to the tale, in 1776, when Jackson was 9, he read aloud a declaration that had been written in Philadelphia. It said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." And it also said that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. Well, Jackson scholar Robert Remini says that the often-told story is apocryphal, which means it's fiction, made up. The truth is, Jackson was a bright boy, a reader, and excited to be part of these transforming times. 4 years after the Declaration was read, Andrew, at 13, joined the South Carolina militia. He was captured in order to clean a British officer's boots. Andrew refused. The angry officer came at him with a sword. Jackson carried the scars for the rest of his life. Andrew's older brother was killed fighting in that Revolutionary War. Andrew and another brother were taken to a military prison where they got smallpox. His second brother died. Then his mother died. At 14, Andrew Jackson was an orphan. "I felt utterly alone," he said. He learned to take care of himself. He had to. He was a fighter with an explosive temper who liked to have a roaring good time. Sometimes he drank and gambled, but he learned from his mistakes. People were attracted to him. He was smart and honest and fun to be around. But what should he do with his life? He tried being a school teacher, but that didn't work out. Then he studied law and became a lawyer. That got him started in politics. When he was 21, he was appointed Attorney General for the region that would soon become Tennessee. By the time he was 30, he owned 2 large plantations near Nashville. Andrew Jackson was a man of action, a born leader who was always doing things and going places and changing the world he lived in. He served in Congress. He was a judge, a general, and a military hero. He came into National Party politics like a cyclone from off the western prairies, wrote a professor named Woodrow Wilson, who would become him president himself. Jackson formed a new political party, the Democratic Party. Harvard University gave an honorary degree to Andrew Jackson. John Quincy Adams was so horrified. He was a Harvard graduate and thought his school was disgracing itself. That he refused to attend the ceremony. JQA, that's John Quincy Adams, called Jackson a barbarian and savage who can scarcely spell his own name. Well, that barbarian and savage became an astonishingly popular president. He was tall and lean and stood straight as the barrel of a rifle. His eyes were blue, bright blue. His thick hair was the color of sand, although it turned silver long before he became president. His soldiers called him Old Hickory, because he said he was as strong as a hickory tree. In his portrait, you can see a kind face. It was also a sad face. His wife Rachel, whom he loved dearly, died just before his inauguration. What an inauguration it was. The people, ordinary people, had elected one of their own to be president. They wanted to be there to see him take office. They wanted to celebrate with him. And so they did. Some came from 500 miles away. It seemed to people in Washington as if everyone in the West had come to town for the big day, and they all wanted to get into the White House at the same time. They poured in through the doors in their buckskin clothes and muddy boots. They climbed on the satin chairs and broke glasses and spilled punch and pushed and shoved. Over here. And they pushed and shoved each other. President Jackson had to go out a back door to get away from the mob. Finally, someone thought to bring buckets of punch out into the lawn and got the crowd out of the president's house. Some remembered President Washington's receptions, where men wore gloves and silver buckles and talked softly. Those were the good old days. How comfortable they seemed. This modern world of Andrew Jackson and his friends would be the end of the United States, some said. That old Federalist Chief Justice John Marshall swore in President Jackson. It was said that Marshall would have just as soon sworn in the devil. Mobs would take over. Life would be awful. So the aristocratic leaders thought. But it didn't happen. Andrew Jackson did change the presidency. It was never the same again. Most people think he helped make it stronger. It helped that he had good manners, natural manners. People who thought they would be angry with him ended up being charmed. For many of the earlier presidents, democracy had meant government for the people. During the Jacksonian era, democracy meant government by the people. Let the people rule was his motto, and ever since Andrew Jackson's time, we have.